Ladies, thank you all so much for joining us for this very, very serious conversation that a lot of parents, a lot of moms and dads and uncles and aunts, everyone is talking about, not just across the nation, not just here in Indiana, but really around the world. And this all came about because I posted a picture this Sunday. As we all know, George Floyd was murdered last Monday, a week ago this past Monday. And I didn't know what to write. I was so full of emotions every single day. I didn't know what to say. And while I was reading other people's Twitter posts and Facebook posts, I was, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I had so many feelings and emotions running through my veins. And I literally was just at a standstill. I was terrorized. I felt threatened. I was hurt. I was angry. And I was on the front porch or on the back porch with Ian this past Sunday, and I was holding him. And in that moment, I kept hearing George Floyd say, "I want my mama." So I thought about my son, and I had Archie take a picture, and I just thought, I could not imagine what that was like. I keep hearing that ring in my ears. How do you all feel when you play that video? Like, I will never get rid of that video, that sound, what he said and what happened out of my spirit. It's like deep in my soul, and it breaks my heart because I keep thinking that could have been my Ian. That could have been my Ian. And so I just wrote on Twitter, I just said, I'm hugging him tighter than ever. What has been the reaction for you all? And Rhonda, we'll start with you.
Oh, Andrea, something happened last night. I had taken a nap, woke up, and as I always do, I walked through the house and I'm looking and I didn't see Christopher in the bed. And so I run downstairs, I come back upstairs, I'm looking in Kristen's room. She's there, but no Christopher. It's 10:30 at night. And my immediate response was panic. And I started to think about George Floyd, Arbery. I just started, all of these visions in my head just started illuminating. And I start panicking. I was sweating. I was, getting all frustrated. I got mad at Chris. I'm like, where is Christopher? So I called him probably 20 times. And I'm like, where is he? Where is he? And finally, about 15 minutes later, now this felt like it was probably like a day, but 15 minutes later, he walks in like, Mom, I went over to Meyer to the store, and I'm like, to Meyer, and so immediately I peel it back and I literally start crying. And I'm like, why in this century do we feel such alarm? Why do we feel so much, anxiety? And it's because of everything that has been going on. And so for me, Andrea, as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as a friend, it's hard for me to understand. Going back to 1619 when slavery first started and moving forward, I mean, it seems like century over century, there have been moves to try to eliminate the racism, but it hasn't stopped. So it's just like I feel very hurt. I feel very frustrated, and I feel fearful for my son and my daughters. Just being honest.
And that's just being Black in America.
Just being Black in America. I mean, the things that I have to tell him on a daily basis. And it's not something that, okay, I told him one time. Every time my son leaves this house, I have an order that I go through.
Yeah.
And why is that? You know, when he leaves, I mean, I'm to the point now, when you get there, FaceTime me and let me know where you are. Why do I have to make sure that I'm telling him to say, yes, ma'am, you know, no, sir, making sure that only 2 people are in the car at one time, do not ride 4 people deep, you know? I mean, every time he leaves this house, I'm having these type of conversations with him. Every
Jennifer,
time.
every time. Jennifer, I saw you react to what Rhonda just said about, that conversation. We've all had the talk. What has the talk
Yeah.
been for you and your son?
My son is an adult now in the Air Force, and I feel like he's safe. He's safer in the Air Force. Like I was terrified when he said he was going to the service. I was proud at the same time, but I was terrified because, it's like, what if a war breaks out? What if? Um, but I can identify with what she's saying because my son growing up, because he went to the Air Force right out of high school. So in his teen years and all in just period, just growing up period, I was a single mom raising this child by myself. And I knew I'm responsible for everything that he does. And I kept him in private school. I worked very hard to try to keep him in the best schools. He was in St. Andrews, so he didn't have to experience all of the things that I experienced when desegregation first started. I was in 6th grade and we were bused out to Franklin Central. And it was like almost every other day, it was a threat of there's going to be a riot. There's going to be a riot. It was a 45-minute drive out there to the township schools. And from 6th to 12th grade, we were out there. And every time we would pull up on the bus, they were waiting for us. Um, so I've experienced that. But for him, he's had a little bit more sheltered life because, like her, I was always like, oh, where are you going? He never got a chance to spend the night over anyone's house. It's like whenever someone, all of his friends from school, and they're in private school, all of his friends from school, they're all gathering. You can go until everyone's getting ready to put pajamas on and go to bed. But after that, call me because you're coming home.
Why is
And
that? Why would you not let him stay over?
yeah, well, because I've had a very dark past myself growing up. So I was a child that was very like abused um, in the worst ways that you can think of. Yes, I'm talking about that type of abuse. And so with him being, in football, he was in basketball, he was in all of these sports, and the coaches wanted him to come spend the night.
Yeah,
Because I don't know what's on the coach's mind.
sure.
Everybody's smiling when they meet the parent. Everyone has that handshake. Hey, how you doing? Coach, I'm Coach so and so. And in front of people, everything is safe when you're sitting there in front of the parent and the parent is with the child. But I don't know if Uncle Billy Bob is coming over, and if you're going to have your friend coming over, what's on his mind. And then, like, even like his friends, I talk to their parents, I know them, but sometimes you don't know them. Some people don't even know themselves. You know what I'm saying?
But was the racial component though a part of why you wouldn't let him stay over?
Not necessarily. No, that wasn't necessary. So I've just always been protective because I've had racism, I've had abuse, I've had a dark past. So I know what it's like I just know people, it's just not a safe world for little girls growing up. And then I didn't want my son, even though he's not a girl, you hear all of these stories about coaches all the time. The news is, it's like even today, and it's like, okay, when does that stop? But yeah, I told him every time he leaves the house, just like her, you can't do what everybody else does. you can't be where everyone else is. He wanted to be dropped off at the mall with his friends, and he thought I was such a mean mom. What? I can't, stay at the mall. He wanted to go Circle Center Mall with his friends, and it's like, nope, not by yourself.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, no one else's mom is coming. No one else is bringing their mom. I'm like, either you stay home and don't go, or you can go to the mall and I'll be there. I don't have to walk with you, but daggone it, I'm gonna be in the store.
Yeah, yeah.
So that if one of your friends think that it's funny to go, go do something crazy, and they see a pack of guys and you're black, and I tell him all the time, even though you're light skinned, you're black.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just
you can't do everything.
You can't do everything. I'm sure with you have 4 sons, and I'm sure you've had that same conversation with your 4 boys as well. What are your boys' ages? From you have 4 of them. What are their ages, and have you had that talk with them, and what did it sound like?
Oh, okay, you can hear me. The ages of my sons now, they range from 19 to 30. So I've got a 19-year-old, a 21, 26, and 30. And yes, we've had the talk. When they were younger, what we did is that we always had boys over because we weren't very comfortable with them being out in groups, hanging at the mall, hanging out, because our concern always was if if you're in a group of primarily Black young boys, Black teenagers, then the cops, you're going to probably get harassed. You're not going to be viewed the same. So you have to be very careful. You have to be very respectful. Make sure you maintain eye contact. So we would have those conversations, but we felt more comfortable with having everything and everybody at our home. So we always had a lot of boys over. Sleepovers, we would fix meals, we would do cookouts because we felt safer with them here than out in the streets, if you want, per se. They would go, they didn't hang out at malls. They didn't do a lot of basketball playing in the park. We got to put a goal in our backyard so that they'd have that, because we just felt the closer they were, the more comfortable we felt. Because you would hear of so many things happening out there. And then again, we had 4 sons. And as they got older, they got driver's license. Then the talk began. Okay, if you're out there driving, you can't have a lot of people in the car. If you get stopped for any reason, put your hands on the steering wheel. Don't reach for anything. We would have those talks constantly because we wanted to make sure they came back home safely. And you just didn't know if that would happen. And we continue to have those talks, even though they're all older. I've got, a 30-year-old and I've got, the 19-year-old. So we had 2 that were away at school. You can't control what they're doing once they leave the house, but that doesn't stop you from being concerned and worried that they're going to come back to wherever their living space is safely. So you want to hear from them. If you send a text, I would just tell them, send a text and say good morning. That way I know you're safe. I know that you're okay. I don't need to know everything that you're doing because you're living your lives, but there's so much going on, and they're living their lives. They want to enjoy their lives. But we want to make sure, and we've always made sure that they're aware that even though you can do anything, you can be anything, if you put the effort in, you've got to be aware that you're Black men in this world. And not everybody is going to look at you the same. And that was just something that we've continued to try to teach, and we've had different talks, even though they're all out living their own lives. And the 2 younger ones are in college and they're back home now because of everything that's been going on with the pandemic. But even though we've moved to a different area so that to give them an opportunity at a better life, we've had to remind them, you're still Black men. We both, me and my husband, grew up in the South. We've recounted things that we went through, when times were different. And we've just continued to tell them that things aren't, it may appear to be different now, but it's not that different now. They're still, those same views are still being held by a lot of people out there. And you just have to be careful anytime you step out of the house.
Amen. Catherine and Chaley, you all live in both worlds. Would you agree? Is that a right assessment, a right statement, saying that you live in both worlds? And what does that world look like for you, Chaley?
It's really interesting because although I have, very blonde hair, most of that is because I'm getting older. So a lot of it's gray, but we've raised two biracial children and three, and we have two boys. One is 23 and the other one is 17. And, for example, his high school is having something tonight, and he has, he had COVID-19, and we've got some issues in our house. So we're dealing with that. But I just had a struggle with him on the way out the door and said, listen, I know you want to go and support the protest at school. So here's some of the chatter that's going on. Here's what I'm seeing on social media. And he's 17, right? So he's like, Mom, I know. Mom, you already told me. Mom, just like you said, going through that list. And, he is 6'4" and plays football and basketball. And when he was younger, he was that cute little curly head kid that everyone would touch. Well, now he's 6'4" and he's not that cute little kid. And it's, we lived in the Midwest for a little bit outside Kansas City, and he was a little younger then, and he had a lot of friends of both races. His experience in the suburban Kansas City area was just kind of people are people, and this thing that we would talk about when we would give him the same discussion, my husband and I, over and over. Mom, you don't understand. Things are different now. People aren't like that here. And, I'd say, son, I know that's what you think, right? So, but he's not that cute little curly head kid to everyone. At 6'4", when we moved here to Philadelphia, he was selling football cards for his fundraiser, and a lady called the police and said that he was stealing packages off of her porch that she saw on Ring. And the police came and showed up, and, of course, they asked to see his backpack, and they searched his backpack, which I said, you don't need to let them see your backpack. You didn't do anything wrong. But the officer called me and said he was cooperative and everything's fine. I just needed to let you know. And, he really had a wake-up call that this really is how the world is. And that was 2 years ago. So for him to experience this, he's trying to figure out what to do. Yeah. Also, because he's 17, he's rebellious. Mm-hmm. So, he's a great kid. He does everything he's supposed to do. But with his parents, he's trying to reconcile being a Black man, because that is how he is seen, and, being 17 and wanting to be free and all of that stuff. Our 23-year-old, when we lived in Kansas City, we would give him the talk, same thing. But on his 18th birthday, with predominantly white friends in the car, was racially profiled and pulled over by the sheriff's office. And he was horrified and terrified. He was terrified to reach, to get the registration. I think there was a taillight out, very typical experiences that we have had, that we've taught our kids. But I think now my son, who's 23, said to me something the other day about the election. We just had a light flicker.
Hello?
Yeah, I think. Are you still there? Storm. Probably storms coming through. They're coming through here too. We'll keep going until she comes back, and when she's not unfrozen. Catherine, I'll go to you now. What does that, she's on her, there she is. Hey, you're back. Yeah, I saw the flicker too. While she's getting back in, Catherine, what is that? Again, you live in both worlds as a mother of Black children and a grandmother of Black children. How have you been able to reconcile living in both worlds and seeing both sides, the white privilege, obviously, and then having your children and grandchildren come home and maybe talk about racist things that have happened to them?
Well, I guess I'm going back all the way back to 1976 when I married outside my race. I fell in love with a black man, and the stories I could tell. And probably one of the worst was my husband dropping him off at a new trucking job, and after dark, so that no one would see that I was white because it was in Mooresville. And the next time he went out on the road, he was in the mountains and his brakes had been cut.
Oh my.
And I've been crying for pretty much 3 days. My grandson is 13. He's 6'1". His dad's 6'9". He's probably gonna be 6'8" by the time he's 16. As you know, Andrea, I lost my youngest daughter at her 25th birthday. So I do realize that anything can happen and we have no control. And when I see my daughter crying, I
Oh,
It hurts. It hurts.
and I talk to my grandkids, and my daughter and son-in-law had the talk with my grandson, and the night my daughter told me that she had the talk with him, and he said, "Can we move?" This was numerous years ago. "Can we move to Hawaii, where President Obama's born?" Because he thought maybe it wasn't racist there. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still going on. I can only say that the things that we see on social media, that I can use this as an example because it's the truth. I had a friend from high school that age 13 I've known for 45 years, 50 years really. I went to visit her. She knew my husband, she knew my kids. Long story short, I talked to her about something, and she flat out said, "I don't believe that, there's a difference, racial profiling, police brutality." She unfriended me in real life. In real life, she unfriended me because she didn't believe it. Well, now she sees with her own eyes. Of course, I don't speak to her because I don't need that in my life.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, yes, I'm afraid for my grandkids. I'm afraid for my daughter. We live in my daughter lives in the suburbs, and my grandkids are doing well, but yes, I'm afraid. I've been crying. I see the racism every single day. I have all my life. And when I married outside my race, I remember not so many years back that my friend would say, before we got married, I gotta leave before dark. And I'd say, "What do you mean?" He said, "I can't be here in Speedway after dark." I knew when my girls were growing up, we could never live in, this was back, now things, I'm not saying it's better all the way, but, there are blacks and multicultural families in Greenwood. I couldn't move my family to Greenwood. I couldn't live in Mooresville. I couldn't live in the suburbs in 76. My kids graduated from IPS, both college graduates. My oldest granddaughter goes to Clark Atlanta. I was petrified when she went to Atlanta. She's a good girl, but she's innocent. She did well, came home, unfortunately, during the pandemic, like everybody's kids was. Do I want her to go back? Yeah, I do, but I'm scared. And I know that this is a big thing. In my 63 years, I've never seen anything this important as far as the mass of it.
The mass. Yeah.
Yes, my dad, matter of fact, my dad in heaven's birthday is today.
Oh.
He's been 100 years old today. And my mom lived to be 97, and she was from England. And I just sobbed, and I was so proud to see them marching in London, my mom's homeland today. I've been there before, and it's got to get better. I only know one thing. I've lost a child. I've lost everyone that I could imagine, but I've lost a child on her 25th birthday by medical injustice, I should say. And so I do know that even though we try to protect our kids, that we are absolutely powerless. I tried everything, but I couldn't save her. So I just know that what we're going through right now is the utmost important in my life. And like I said, always say to my children, to my daughter and my grandchildren, I call them my heartbeats, because I didn't live for about 10 years after I lost my daughter. I had a mental breakdown, and I've just started living the last 3 years. And I want to see my grandchildren graduate from college. And I will do anything to see that. And I've always told them that till my last breath, I will kneel. I don't know what else to say. It's got to get better. It's got to. Our families depend on it.
What you said about the fact that the whole world is watching this moment. The whole world is watching this moment. The whole world is watching this moment, and I feel like, as much as we've talked about to my son about MLK and the civil rights movement, like, I really feel like this is a new movement. Like, I just feel like this is a new movement, and I just pray that this is not a moment, but that there's real substantive change, and that there's real conversation, and that people really connect. And I just pray that it's not a moment, but that it's really a movement that continues beyond this. That all the people that we're seeing marching in all the cities across America, that it doesn't just end. That we are intentional about how we treat one another.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Can I just say something about that? I think this generation, they're tired. They're tired of seeing my generation, the generation before. They see the protests in the 60s. And a lot of them, I was talking to my husband about that. They saw under the Obama presidency, they were young. They saw this Obama presidency, and they were born into this, whatever it was for them that felt like empowerment. And then right after this, you see what's going on right now with just the hate and the vitriol. And my oldest son said to me, he's really, he learned, and he's like, Mom, how can you look at, this policy and say that was successful? It wasn't far enough. We need to do this. This generation of people, I think in general, is making other people listen. And this generation, at least of my Black children and their friends, are saying, I'm not going to just stay in a room and listen to this kind of racism or listen to these kinds of jokes or watch this on Snapchat. They're demanding that stop. And they're demanding that my generation and white people like me educate other white people, that it's time for you to not just be in a room and just kind of, that was really inappropriate, so I'm going to leave the room. No, I'm going to say, and this generation is saying, no, it's your responsibility to speak up. You failed to do that, and now we're going to make you speak up. I think you're right. I think it is a movement where I'm seeing people on social media who have never said anything, trying their best to clumsily trip over the words, but they just are saying, I don't know what to say, which I've said to my white friends is the best thing to say. Say, I don't know what to say, but this is wrong, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to start speaking up. And I think this generation, this younger generation in their 20s and, below in their 30s are saying enough. And I do think it's going to change things, and the protests will change policy. That's what protests are for. Protests are to change policy. And if these are our future leaders, then they will change the policy, or they'll demand that whoever's in power does.